Welcome to Trinity Radio. I'm Braxton Hunter, and along with me is
Jeremy Lee.
And we're here in Western Australia at the National Convention, annual National Convention for the Overseas Christian Fellowship. And we're here to tell you all about that and what evangelism in Australia is like. So
it's not heresy. It's
it's Harrison.
Wow! They gave us nothing but tradition and no argument. All they did was get on this stage, yell real loud, and set a straw man on fire.
Okay, now I was not impressed. I've never heard of this gentleman before, but.
And there is no evidence at all, except in the imagination of Dr. Braxton and like-minded thinkers, that there is such a thing as an objective morality.
All right, well, that was a very passionate speech by Professor Alvarez. However, let me point out a couple of things that I have not argued tonight that Professor Alvarez seems to think that I have argued.
Everything that begins to exist must have a cause for its existence.
On behalf of humanity, God became man to die for the sin of the world. Then, because of that sacrifice, you can rise from the dead just like he rose from the dead. All right, so right now we are in a box, and we just fought a spider. I'll put the spider up on the screen, and it probably doesn't look that big, but it is really big. And we did battle with the spider, didn't we, Jeremy?
Yeah, it was pretty big.
And Jeremy has been this really even keel, like James Bond type figure so far. But when we attacked this spider, it was a different Jeremy. And so, but anyway, so what I'm here, and we're not going to be able to do a normal Trinity Radio episode this week with Jonathan. So what I thought we would do instead is I would show up here with Jeremy, and we could talk a little bit about what it's like to do evangelism in Australia. Now, correct me if I'm wrong when I kind of explain some of this, but most of the people at this conference are living in Australia, going to school here at one of the universities.
Yep.
They call it uni. University is uni. That's an Australian thing.
Definitely is an Australian thing.
You put Y or IE at the end of everything.
Yeah.
So
well, yeah.
Go ahead.
I think uni is what we call it here, but you call it college in the States?
We just say, I'm going to college, or I'm going to university, or...
Yeah, we would call it that in Singapore, Malaysia. I'm not sure about in the UK, because they have universities as well.
But it's uni here.
Yeah.
And they also have, okay, so you probably know that most of the world outside of the United States calls soccer football, and we call soccer, and we call football because words mean things. But here they have soccer, football, and footy, which is an Australian thing that is like, you told me you don't even understand. Was it you that told me you don't understand really the rules?
Might have been someone else, but I don't understand all the rules. They have a bit of basketball, a bit of rugby, a bit of football or soccer in it. So it's a mix of three things, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to most people, but they love it here. Yeah.
Okay. So, but anyway, most of the people at this convention, which they call convy, is are people, because this is an overseas Christian fellowship. Most of these people are from what countries?
Well, most of us are from Singapore and Malaysia, but there are people from like Hong Kong or China, and some local Australians come and join us as well. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, and your family is from Singapore.
Yes, that's right.
And you have Chinese ancestry, right?
Well, way back, like talking like 1800s or
yeah,
something.
Like not your grandma.
No.
And but you don't speak Chinese much.
No.
Now you're afraid your mom's going to see this and she's going to be embarrassed that you said you don't speak Chinese.
Yeah, because she, as a kid, she's the one who slaved over my Chinese in school and everything.
Oh,
so
okay.
I think that I can speak Chinese, but it's probably has a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah. I didn't hear any Chinese foul language when we were fighting the spider, but
no.
So some Chinese profanity
or any foul language. Just to be clear. About
No foul language.
No
foul language. Okay, so you got Singapore, Malaysia, but these are people who are living here, and a lot of these people are going to stay, or some of these people are going to stay in Australia afterwards. And are some of the people that are here at this conference like already full-blown citizens of Australia?
Yeah, in fact, I am a citizen of Australia, and quite a few people are PRs, permanent residents, or citizens. But the real in the history of OCF, which is what we call it, a lot of people who study here, they become Christians, they become stronger in their faith, or they get built up as disciples, and then we send them back to their home countries, usually Singapore, Malaysia, or wherever else, and then they start to be disciple makers there.
Cool.
And in fact, many churches have started in Singapore and Malaysia who were OCFers who went back home.
So people a part of this organization go back. Now tell me this. I think this would be interesting. Now don't turn this off if you think, well, this is like a special interest episode. I don't care. I'm really just here to hear Braxton and Jonathan argue about something. No. Don't go away, because this is super interesting. Because if you're interested in apologetics and soteriology, because we'll talk a little bit about soteriology, but if you're interested in apologetics, Australia, as we all know, is a very secular culture.
Very much so,
right?
Yeah.
And not necessarily the culture of, well, the Asian culture that most of you guys, you go to churches that are predominantly Asian. Most people, is that right?
Most of the people at the convention now would be going to those churches, but some do go to local ones where there's a big mix of Australians, like white Australians and Asian people.
Yeah, so obviously in church and within the Asian communities that are together here, there's a lot of Christianity that's very much like, maybe like evangelical Christianity that we're used to in the States. Okay, so, but aside from that, there is a secularism in Australia that the OCF is trying to. Now tell me a little bit about that, because I'm kind of wondering about that. So you're trying to, what I've heard at this conference so far is obviously a lot like we would at a church growth conference or something. How do we get more people interested in the OCF? How do we invite people? How do we impact them? But we also have heard some stuff about evangelism and apologetics from another speaker, David Gregg. He's really great, and he was talking about actually reaching others, and it sounded more like regardless of whether they're a possible candidate for OCF or not. But so at a conference like this, what are we really trying to do? Is it more about just getting people into OCF, or is it about getting people into the kingdom?
Yeah, that's a good point. So there's two main parts to this whole conference or convention that we're having right now. The first 3 days, and right now in day 2, is the annual general meeting, or the AGM. And later on, when Braxton's going to be speaking, is called the convention part, and that's 5 days of sermons and breakouts, as we call them, or we call them workshops, and that's for teaching and training and building up the members of OCF. And the main vision of OCF is summed up as reach out, build up, and send back. So the reach out part is to reach out to predominantly international students on campus and reach them for Christ, build them up to be disciple makers. And then the send back part is like sort of a missionary thing, or sending out on a mission to wherever they are in their workplace to be living out, as disciples of Christ.
So this thing is kind of like, this is kind of like Campus Crusade in terms of organization, right? Loosely, it's a campus-based organization that has chapters, or you call them centers, at the different campuses and universities and colleges, and it's a ministry that is based in these student groups. But with yours, the distinction is it's primarily made up of people who are from other countries aside from Australia who've come to Australia to study. And since the surrounding countries, there's a lot of Asian countries, it becomes more than anything else an Asian population in the membership.
Yes.
Right. But that's not all you're trying to do, because so would it be fair to think of OCF like people would think of their church? Obviously, we're going to try to make sure our church is doing everything right. And obviously, we want people to be members of our church. But of course, we want people to get saved and become Christians, even if they never become part of our church or a part of the OCF in your case, right? So the build-up is preparing you to do kingdom work, even outside of the OCF.
That's right. Well, that's a good point, because it brings me to one aspect of OCF that is unique, which is how it's only students who run it, and there's only students who lead it. So there's no staff working people usually or in fact, there's no staff at all who make decisions about the direction of the ministry or how we do things. And that aspect of, I guess, the ministry means that when you leave or when you graduate, you have to go and integrate into churches or take on like ministry and stuff. So the whole purpose of OCF is to prepare you for that, living your life out in your profession or whatever as a Christian.
Okay, great.
For the kingdom. And like you said, so like, you know, with churches, they want membership and all that. And I like to put it this way, like how if we're doing campus work and we're reaching out to people, and if an Australian comes to Christ, that's perfect. And we're very happy about that. But predominantly, as we are international students, we find that our strength is reaching out to international students around us.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, so now let me talk a little bit about what I've seen so far. Let's see. Yeah, we're still going. Let me talk a little bit about what I've seen so far. So I've seen, right now we're in the weekend before the actual convention, the convy. We're just before that. So what you've been doing is you've had what you call the general, what do you call it? The AG.
Yeah, annual general meeting.
Annual general meeting, and what that is like a big business meeting, and then preparation. So they do have workshops and stuff just for the people that are leading these things and helping with leadership. But you're also, what I found so impressive is you're having, it looks like the United Nations, like there's this big table and there's 75 people sitting around this table, and you wouldn't believe it, but it's student led, like you said. So it's not like you have like some college student, like this is what it happens a lot in the States. You've got some college students that are there because they're kind of supposed to be here, and then you've got some adults, that is like some old people who are sitting around doing everything. And we might ask Johnny to come up and talk about what he did this summer, but he's not really the main guy. That's not what's going on here. What's going on here is individual students who might be freshmen or might be seniors, and they're hearing some report from another center, maybe in Sydney or maybe in Melbourne. And they're saying, wait a minute, hold on a second. Why did you do what you did? Why did you make the decision you did? Or your discipleship? How are you doing discipleship? Because we want to learn from you. And then in terms of like organizational things, like I hope it's okay to talk a little bit about this. One thing that they were talking about last night is, you know how when churches use music, they have to pay for a certain copyright to use this copywritten music, or some license to use this copywritten music. And they're taught, so the overall organization pays for that out of the dues or whatever that people pay. And there was a change to how that works. And so some of the students were like, well, now wait a minute, what's this change about? How does all that? And what's cool is you've got the people that are 20, 21 years old who are getting involved and really like really wanting to know, and they're invested, and they're like, hey, this is an organization that I'm a part of. It's my organization. And I want to make sure it's all working right. And any adults that are present, I say adults, they're adults, but any old people that are present are really only there as an advisor role and not saying a whole lot. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think, and that's one of the distinctives, right?
Definitely. And that's something that we really defend a lot. So if people try to bring in, like, if you ever get a sense of losing that student-run, student-led part of OCF, that's why we have these AGMs, to make sure that we stick to the core of OCF.
Okay.
Yeah. And this organization has been around for like 60 years, since 59. So it's been around for a while.
Wow.
Yeah. And we even have speakers who were in OCF earlier become pastors and Christian leaders, and then they come back to these conventions to speak to us and have sermons and all that.
So this is the 60th anniversary.
Next year will be the 60th.
Next year is the 60th anniversary, and this is the first time you've ever had an American come to OCF.
That is correct.
Because who needs us, right? Honestly, I had somebody tell me, they're like, we've never done this before because we have great Australian speakers. What do we need an American for? And I said, wow, that's a lot of pressure. And they were like, yeah. But that's good. So tell me why you wanted to have someone come from America, and what issues you wanted us to talk about, and why. As much as you want, or as little as you want to say about that.
All right, sure. Well, I think Braxton was hinting about this a bit earlier, and that the culture of Australia has really changed in the last few years, or maybe not even the last few years, but long ago, but it's becoming extremely secular, and there's a lot of atheists, and the agenda of, like, I would say you call it the liberal left sort of movement is very, very real on campus. So we have like the rainbow LGBT flags flying over, posters all over the place. So that's the reality in universities here. Probably in the States it's similar.
Oh yeah, same thing. Yeah,
definitely. So in this environment, I feel like we need someone who understands how to do evangelism in these environments and has the knowledge of apologetics and how to reach out to people who don't believe in any God at all, and that's the environment we're in. So I felt like, give Braxton an email, see what he thinks.
Well, one of the things that David Gregg, who is an Australian, whose family is from Singapore, right? Or there's a mix there. But he was doing. He's an apologetics guy. He went to Dallas Theological Seminary, and today he was doing a talk about evangelism. And he and I talked for a while afterwards. But one thing he said that I thought was really interesting is he said, one of his Dallas professors said, in the West, the question is, do you believe in God, or why should I believe in God? Whereas in the East, it's, which God should I believe in? And he said that is increasingly not the case anymore. That general rule is not the case anymore when it comes to the younger generation. Maybe a little bit with older generations, but it really is across the board now. Why should I believe in God at all? Right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting. So you were telling me the other day, we've talked a lot about, like, so we did the Weimar series where we took different worldviews, everything from Jehovah's Witness to atheism to Scientology to Mormonism, Islam. We talked about all those things and did apologetics that way. But you were telling me, but it really is the case that atheism has a stronghold here in Australia, and it sounds like increasingly even in places like Singapore.
Yeah, well, very much so. Like here, I think if you find 10 people, it's probably like maybe 2 or 2 or 3 are interested in the topic of God or have an understanding of God. Maybe 1, not even, might be a Christian.
Yeah.
And if you like sort of like say that you believe in God, you really are like looked at weirdly in a way, and you sort of feel weird.
Yeah.
They make you feel weird for believing in God.
Yeah.
Which is probably like just a sign of the how strong atheism here is in Australia.
Yeah.
So even if like students from Asia are coming over, they're in this environment now where in university, like, your mind is probably more, I guess, flexible, open to things, and you're coming to this culture where atheism is the thing, and you're away from your parents, and even if they're Christian or they're like religious or Buddhist or whatever, they come over here, and now you're with this people. You're going to lose. It's a very high chance that you're going to lose your direction or be influenced by what the culture is here.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons for having like campus ministry.
Yeah. So now one thing that I think is a little bit interesting is there are groups like Campus Crusade that are here. They go by another name, but there are groups like that basically have seen success in the States or in other Western countries, and so they come to Australia and they set up and they have their thing, but it's not. It doesn't have the history in this place that OCF has. They've been at it for so long. And one thing you said, I think it was you, that I think is really true is not only are these centers, OCF centers, able to survive, which is impressive enough, but they're able to survive being completely student-led. And these other groups come, and I won't name which ones, but there are other groups that have come, and I heard in the reports and people talking about things that they don't know what to do here the way that OCF does, and so they either don't succeed or they try to leech off of organizations like OCF, or they just die. And so here's why I bring this up. This is not a sales pitch, and I certainly don't have anything to get out of it. But if you want a ministry to pray for that is in one of the kind of on the front lines of atheism in the world right now, OCF is a very theologically conservative, orthodox, evangelical group in Australia, impacting atheists in Australia, and so and it's led by students. Don't if you can pray for them, that's great. But if you can give financially to them, that'd be great. They have a Facebook group that we'll link it in the Trinity Radio Facebook group, and you can go there. But if you search OCF 2018, it'll bring you to the one for this year, right?
Yeah.
And they can find a way to contact you and maybe support what's going on here. I'm thinking that me and Sarah are going to do that personally ourselves, because we
probably put something up on the YouTube description.
Yeah, we can put it up in the description. That's right.
Yeah.
You're good at this.
Yes.
You know what you're doing.
I know.
So now one thing, and if you don't like us talking about this, I'll edit this out. But one thing that I'm here talking about is soteriology. For those that are familiar with my ministry and really Trinity Radio, I've been very interested in evangelism, apologetics, and soteriology in that order. Apologetics, evangelism is the main thing for me. I want to see people saved. I'm more interested in that than I am apologetics or soteriology. I'm interested in apologetics insofar as it helps that conversation with evangelism. And soteriology is a thing that, and I want people to hear me say this, I have never intentionally looked for an opportunity to talk about soteriology, aside from maybe a couple of podcasts, mostly because Pritchett made me, and a few blog articles that I did write. But I'm in a book on the subject. I have a chapter in a book because somebody took something I wrote and said, can we make this a chapter? I've gone places and spoken because people asked me. I've debated because I've been asked. I've never tried to get a hearing, but you said, hey, I think this is something. It's not that we're trying to start a war, but I think this is something that we need to hear from a not necessarily Calvinist voice. Mm-hmm. So why was that? Why is that an important thing to you?
Well, to me, and I won't go too much into this, but in the previous conventions, we've always had speakers who have had like a Calvinistic slant on things, and they even had it was literally called a predestination workshop, and then they just assumed the definition of predestination, and then there was just pretty much a 5-point workshop without presenting anything fair about the non-Calvinist side. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people here, I think this soteriology thing isn't as big in Australia as it is in the States, or at least in the SBC, where we have people like Nathan Flowers with Soteriology 101, going at it with TGC and all these things. But because like Desiring God, the Gospel Coalition, all these websites also do other topics like just Christian living, discipleship, and all that. Sure. People here are finding those resources, and they're great resources, I think. But then they like these ministries, and then when they find questions about soteriology, they turn to them as well, and then they find all this reformed viewpoints. Yeah. And that's all they're getting here. Mm-hmm. And I just of course we do the preamble before we talk about what Calvinism does to evangelism, the philosophy behind evangelism. But myself, I'm just worried about how when we don't have a non-Calvinist perspective, or a strong one besides Foresight faith, Arminianism, I'm just worried about how the members of OCF will view evangelism when we're all thinking with a Calvinistic mindset. Yeah. And I think having someone come and say, hey, there's actually robust scholarship and reasons to believe in something other than Calvinism. Yeah. I think that will benefit us quite a lot. Yeah. Yeah, it is shocking. What you're saying is true. Because a lot of the people making these resources are and preaching the sermons that are getting a hearing today in the evangelical world. You got guys like John Piper and J.D. Greer, who's now the president of Southern Baptist Convention, who it's questionable. He says he's not necessarily a Calvinist, but he's not a Calvinist or whatever it is. But people like Matt Chandler, and in the past guys like Mark Deaver and Mark Driscoll and D.A. Carson came to Perth just a few months ago, I think, or last year or something. So yeah. So all these voices, you're right, they give you good resources on other things, and so this just kind of comes in. And so if you're in a place like Australia where hey, I'm just trying to serve the Lord, and I'm taking in all this stuff, and they're telling me, everything is couched in Reformed terminology. You just kind of take that on board. I think we saw that in the States in the 1970s and 80s as well, where even people like my dad was a pastor, and
the commentaries you had at that time, the big preachers at the time. It was all couched in that language, and so you just kind of adopt that. Yeah. But I don't think people realize that some of our best thinkers today, guys like William Lane Craig and Mike Licona and Norman Geisler and Ravi Zacharias and John Lennox, and all these people are people who have a non-Calvinist view that is not the typical Arminian view that you. I was just listening to Leighton Flowers on his podcast. He was talking to this pastor who just came out of Calvinism and apologized to his church that he had been teaching them Reformed theology. And one of the things the guy said was, he said the same thing you just said. He said the only thing I'd ever heard from a non-Calvinist view was this look down the corridors of time stuff, Arminian stuff. And so anyway, there are some heavyweights, and we want to expose people to those heavyweights. But the way I approach it, the way I plan to approach it, unless you tell me otherwise, is I think we need to emphasize, first of all, what do we all agree is true about soteriology from a conservative evangelical perspective? And what I see that we agree about is because of Adam's sin, we are all born with a nature and an environment inclined towards sin, and we sin, and we are lost before God and condemned. We stand condemned, and so because of that, we would be on our way to hell. We are on our way to hell when in that situation. And then because Jesus died on the cross to atone for our sin, when we trust Him and when we repent and we place our faith in Him, we are regenerate, which is just fancy terminology for born again. In John chapter 3, it says there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. The same came to Jesus at night and said to him, Master, Teacher, we know that you are a man sent from God. For who can do these miracles that you do except God is with him? And Jesus said, you must be born again. If you are not born again, you cannot see the kingdom of God. So born again, that's regeneration. And we believe that it's by grace, through faith, that we are saved. Grace, it's nothing we did to earn it. And by faith, that's a word for trust or loyalty. You're trusting. It's not just mental assent. And when that happens, I still think everybody should agree on this.
Yeah,
so far, because of this, we are justified, which means people could quibble about this, but pretty well, we are acquitted. If you think about your situation before God as being in a courtroom, you're kind of acquitted, but you're not just acquitted for no reason. You're acquitted because Jesus atoned for that sin. So you're justified. Then you begin a process of sanctification, becoming more like Jesus. Romans 12:2 says, be not conformed to this world, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then ultimately you're glorified. One day we will be like Jesus. And Ephesians 1 tells us all the things that are predestined to happen. Well, I slipped up there. Some would disagree about predestination, but all these things are going to happen one day when we're glorified. I think all of that is what any evangelical Christian should say, whether they're Calvinist or not. And they may quibble about the order of some things, but they would say, yeah, I mean, that's soteriology. But then, if you go one level down and you start asking some annoying questions, it gets a little bit deeper. And I think, I'm talking a lot here, but I think that the thing I would want if I were you, and if I had a vested interest in OCF, which I feel like I do now because I'm here with you and spending time doing this, is I would want it to be a thing. I would want people to know all the sides of this thing.
Yes.
Number one, because they want to know as much about what God did for them as they can. But then also so that when these things come up, when these disagreements come up, it's not something that's alien to them. They understand both sides of it, and they can have an intelligent conversation without it becoming vicious.
Yes, that's very much so.
So they've heard the Calvinist stuff before, whether it was intentionally or actively Calvinist, and so now they're going to hear it maybe another side.
Yeah, and one thing that I suppose I should mention right now is that OCF is a non-denominational organization, and that's part of the constitution of OCF. But in the spirit of being non-denominational, that's why I wanted to bring something other than Calvinism, so that we don't become, I don't know, Presbyterian or something.
They could accidentally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So people might try to say, "Oh, but it's a non-denominational thing. Why are you like pushing non-Calvinist views?" but I think it's actually more in the spirit of being non-denominational. I wanted people to sort of hear both sides of the argument. So I did ask Braxton to present a bit of the Calvinist side, but most already have an idea of that. But actually, I think it would be good to flesh that out, because most people actually don't know the implications that leads on to. Right. So maybe that's something to talk about later. But
yeah, I'm going to try, I think what I'm going to try to do, and if an OCFer were to see this video, what hopefully I did try to do, is to present both sides of this thing as fairly as possible. Now, like Leighton Flowers always says, if you want to know what Calvinism is, don't just listen to what people like us say. Go get it from a Calvinist. And the same is also true the other way. Don't just listen to what John Piper, James White, D.A. Carson, whoever says about a non-Calvinist position. Get it from whatever position that is. If it's an Arminian, hear it from an Arminian. If it's a traditionalist, which is what I think my view should be called, then get it from a traditionalist. But get it from that person. But that said, I'm going to try to present it fairly. I'm not going to lie and say, I don't know what I think about this. I'm agnostic. I mean, they could Google me and know that's not true. But it's going to be obvious that I'm not a Calvinist, but I'm going to try to present them fairly. And part of that is because I think with some of these things, if they're said plainly, I think people are smart enough that can figure it all out. So anyway, is there anything else you want to say about OCF or what God's doing with you or anything else? This is your shot. You're on Trinity Radio, and you've been a listener and a supporter for a long time. So anything else you want to say?
Yeah, well, firstly, I just like to say that we're not holding a knife at Braxton's back or a gun at him to make him say to come and support or donate to us, okay? Because
nobody asked me to say nice things about you. I believe all this.
But if you do feel like this is something worth supporting, or even just a one-time donation, we would really, really appreciate anything you could give, and especially just praying for us and keeping us, like, I guess, in your minds as part of the kingdom on the other side of the world. Other than that, I think it's just campus ministry is something that is really close to my heart. And even though you can't be a student forever, I think it's one of the times when people's minds are most open, and that can be good or bad, because they might get good ideas or bad ideas.
Right.
So that's why we at OCF really want to hone in on this part of people's lives and try and expose them or share the gospel with them and bring them into the kingdom. And now in Australia, there's actually 500,000 international students at one time. And that's quite a lot, considering that Australia's not, in terms of population, not a huge.
25 million, I think. Is
something
the
like
population.
that. That's right. So 500,000, and that's just students in this sort of age group. But at the same time, OCF has not been getting bigger as the international student population gets bigger. In fact, things have been, if we're honest, have been going down a bit in terms of numbers. So we really need that support and that, I guess, any prayers that you can give to us for that. And that's why we have these AGMs and these conventions every year to try and see what can we do better, how can we improve, how can we train ourselves better to do work for the kingdom and bring people to Jesus.
Yeah. Now, you want to look for OCF Australia, because there is another organization that's also called Overseas Christian Fellowship in Europe somewhere, or in
London.
London, okay.
And New Zealand, actually.
Okay, and it's not the New Zealand. Don't help the New Zealand.
No, not at all.
I'm just kidding.
Don't even look at them.
No, but you want OCF Australia. And so I guess at this point, we're going to get back to killing spiders. And someone told me that there is that of the 40 or of the 50 deadliest insects on Earth, 40 of them are in Australia or something like that. So, and at night you hear weird animals outside and weird noises. I don't think those are the OCFers. I think those are animals. But anyway, also check out Matt and Billy, Matt Chisholm and Billy Wendelin. Sorry, Matt and Billy, I had to think for a second. At the Bible Brodown, and check out Steve Gregg's The Narrow Path, and Leighton Flowers, Soteriology 101. You were on Leighton's show, right?
I actually was, yes. He's talking about soteriology and stuff.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, that's all he talks about. That's not true, but that's what people say. And so those are our sister podcasts, and so they support us and promote us, and we do the same. And so we think that those are good places to go to if you're looking for more stuff. to listen to while you're at the gym or in the car or whatever. So I hopefully will make it back one day from Australia. But if I don't, then I hope you enjoy Pritchett. And I'm sorry, Pritchett, that you couldn't be a part of this, but we will see you next time on Trinity Radio.
If you would like more content, click here and keep watching Bible studies. Click up here. And finally, we want you to subscribe. We need more subscribers, so click here.